Hello, my name is Adam Miller, and I'm the Managing Director at Theater Tuscaloosa. And it's my pleasure to welcome you today to this edition of Masterclass Mondays, in which I will be sharing a little bit about a day in the life of a managing director. So let's get started. The first thing that I want to talk about with you today is who is the managing director? Many times people will come up to me and say, "Thank you for all you do." And it's clear as I look into their eyes that they have no idea what I do. They know that I work here and that Tina loves me and that I work very hard, but they have no idea what I do. And like many mythical creatures, like a wizard or some magical person, it's a big mystery how I accomplish what I accomplish. So today we're going to pull back the veil a little bit and look at what are the day-to-day types of things that a managing director would handle. So let's talk about the purpose of a managing director. My role is to support the creation of art, in this case theater, by helping to competently manage the business operations of the organization. So I work with Tina, who is the artistic soul of our organization, and help take things off her plate that would weigh her down from doing the best possible job that she could as a theater artist. And those details are the business-oriented details. How do I get to be a managing director, or how would anybody get to be a managing director? Well, first of all, there's an educational component. More often than not, a managing director qualification will include a master's degree of some form. And so that could take the form of a MA or MS, a Master of Science, an MFA, a Master of Fine Arts, which is what I have, or possibly an MBA or some combination. There are programs out there where you earn both your MFA and MBA at the same time. The point, though, is that you have expertise in one of the following fields, like theater management, arts administration, public administration. Sometimes you'll find with managing directors, or nonprofit management, or just a business degree like an MBA. There are other fields as well, and this is a field that is evolving and is relatively new in comparison to a number of other fields. So there's a lot of new titles coming up that you may see: museum management, dance management, all those kinds of things. The further we go along in this field, the more specific it tends to get. So of course there's that educational component, but there's also the experience component, because ideally a person who is going to apply to become a managing director would have already had at least 10 years of experience in one of the various functional areas, or in multiple functional areas that we're about to discuss in a moment, because you'll be the person responsible for making sure those things get executed. You may not always be the exact person carrying out each role, but you are the person making sure they get done, doing quality control, and making sure that it meets the standards of your organization. But just as important of that, in my opinion, is a love for the arts. And so you really want to see in an ideal candidate somebody who enjoys participating in the arts. It may not be your exact art form. Perhaps you're looking for somebody to be a managing director that spent years doing dance, or spent years doing visual arts, or plays an instrument or something like that, but some kind of deep-seated love for the arts, so that they have that empathy and sympathy for the people that they're working with, who are artists, and have an understanding and love and passion for that as well. Because you certainly don't go into this field for the money. Most arts organizations are nonprofit organizations. So being in a managing director's role in the nonprofit sector is not as financially rewarding. So hopefully you have some love, some passion for the art as well. So let's look at all the different large areas, and then we're going to dive into what those areas actually entail on a day-to-day basis. So the 7 functional areas include planning and development, marketing and public relations, personnel management, resource management, board relations, labor relations, and finally government relations. And I picked this photo of myself performing in Moonlight and Magnolias because when I think about all of the different things that are technically on my plate that I'm technically responsible for, it can be a little overwhelming. So I make that face. Ah, okay. So Planning and development. Planning and development is a buffet of lots of exciting and tasty treats. And so that's why I picked this photo. Also, when I was in grad school, my friend Jeremy Thompson often talked about that what we seem to do more often than not in the management area was to put food on a plate. And so sometimes it is about putting food on a plate, but that's a metaphor. Let's talk about what it actually entails. First off is strategic planning. And so this is the process of working with all of the stakeholders of an organization, such as your staff, your talent perhaps, definitely your board of directors, and working out what you want your organization to accomplish in a variety of timeframes. So you may have short-term goals that are within the next year, midterm goals that might be 2 to 5 years, and long-term goals that might be 5 to 10 years away, so that you really have a roadmap as an organization of what you're trying to accomplish. You're not just producing plays willy-nilly with no sense of where you're going or what you're trying to say to the public or how your organization will function from a business perspective. Play selection is, in our organization, really the primary responsibility of our executive producer. Some organizations have a managing director and artistic director that are actually co-heads of the organization. That's not the case in our organization, but that doesn't mean that the managing director would not have a significant amount of input on play selection. So it's quite common for Tina to say, hey, I really need you to read this play and give me your feedback on this particular script because I need to know what you think. Are you going to be able to sell this easily? Or is this going to be one of those challenging scripts that's going to be great artwork but hard to sell? And then how can we plan for that? And then once we select a slate of shows that we want to produce, we've got to get permission for that. And that's a lot of times where the managing director can come in and negotiate with the companies who hold the rights to produce these shows. Shows like, organizations like Music Theater International, MTI, there are lots of them out there, dramatists, etc., where you reach out to them and say, hey, we want to produce this play at this particular time with this many performances in a house that seats this many people, and we're going to charge this much for the tickets. How much will we owe you if we would do this show, and will you give us permission to do that show? And so that's a little negotiation that occurs there. Then we also help to set up the timeline of production and performance. While the executive producer might be focusing on setting up your audition dates and your rehearsals and the build schedule and when all of the designers are going to have deadlines, the managing director is over there trying to figure out, okay, when can we put season tickets on sale? When can we put individual tickets on sale? When are we going to have to hold photo shoots so that we can create posters and advertisements, and negotiating contracts for said advertisements and planning to print postcards and get them in the mail and all that kind of great stuff that I'll talk more about in a moment under the marketing and publicity. So it's kind of this dual process where we work together as a team, and I focus on those business aspects and the executive producer is looking more at the artistic side. Also under planning and development would be helping to engage artists and labor by issuing contracts. And so a contract protects both the producing organization and the artist. And a good agreement has reciprocity, so that we are offering to pay you a certain amount, and here are the expectations that we expect back from you. And so we make sure to offer very fair contracts to the best of our ability to the artists that we engage. And for us, that doesn't mean the actors. For the most part, we occasionally have an actor that we would engage through a contract, but most of our actors are volunteers. Instead, it really refers to our designers and our directors. So the lighting designer, sound designer, scenic designer, etc., would be given a contract and paid a fee for their services, because it requires a higher level of expertise and is usually a scarce resource, especially in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So, and then sometimes we're bringing people from outside our community, which also enhances the work that we do and gives our actors an opportunity to work with a variety of very talented people. Venue selection and reservation is on a managing director's plate sometimes, but in our case at Theater Tuscaloosa, we are fortunate enough to be in residence at Shelton State Community College and know that we can always perform in the Bean Brown Theater. However, we do have to reserve the space, even though we are the prime tenant. We always go through all the appropriate paperwork steps and negotiations that happen internally here at Shelton to make sure that we have reserved our dates for our performances and rehearsals, etc. But it's not nearly as daunting as it would be in a larger market where we'd actually have to, like in New York City, where we'd have to reserve the theater and pay fees and things like that. However, we do have our second stage program that goes out into the community. So we sometimes do have to worry about contracts and reservations and things like that with venues when we secure those venues for the second stage program. Budget development. How much are we going to spend on producing every single show, and how much do we expect each show to bring in? Is very, very important. And the way that we do that is by looking back at historical figures. So I'm going to look back at last season's and the last 5 seasons budgets to see all the different categories. You know, we have a very, very detailed and long budget to cover the approximately $250,000 annual budget that we have. And so we want to make sure that we're going to be in the ballpark, and so that we don't go over budget on our expenditures and that we don't fall under budget for our income in our various categories. And then fundraising, you've got to pay for that budget once you've developed it. And so fundraising involves everything from asking individuals to tack on a little extra to their season tickets, to approaching foundations and governmental organizations for grants, going to corporations and asking for corporate sponsorships, and then planning special events. We do every year a lights, camera, auction program, which is a Facebook auction. We just completed that in March this year. And that's another special event where we raise money. So we've got to plan all of these things out in advance. We don't just come up with them on the spur of the moment. And educational outreach. Now, this is part of the development side of planning and development. We have a two-sided mission. Our mission is to both create quality live theatrical opportunities for the people of West Alabama to participate in on stage, behind the scenes, and in the audience. But we also have that other side, which is educational outreach, where we help people develop their appreciation of theater, develop their skills to participate in theater. And so we have our Theater Tuscaloosa Academy program that has things like tap dance classes, improv classes, auditioning workshops, and then we also use that as a way to develop our volunteer pool with things like house manager trainings, stage manager trainings, dresser trainings for backstage that happen periodically throughout every season. All right, so why do we have a picture here of these people in this weird place with this weird background? Well, this is a photo shoot that we did for Greece, where we had Danny and Sandy all dressed up by our costumer there, Jeanette Waterman, and just making sure they look exactly perfect. And our photographer, Porfirio Solorzano, was setting up this wonderful shot, which ended up being in a poster. So we're talking about marketing and PR. So relationships. For me, there's a dual meaning of PR. It's public relations, but it's also about personal relationships. You have to develop personal relationships, not only with members of the public who are your patrons, your audience members, but also with members of the media, with sales reps from the different organizations where you're going to advertise, et cetera, in order to make sure that you're getting the best possible deal for your organization. Part of marketing and PR is about ticket sales. And so you have to decide, what is your distribution method going to be? Are you going to sell all online? Are you going to have a formal box office? Are you going to partner with other organizations in town where people can go to their bank and buy your tickets? There's lots of different ways to distribute your tickets, but you've got to plan that and make it happen. And then you have to set your prices. You know, you're selling art, you're selling an event that happens at a certain time and then disappears forever. And so what is the value of that? What will your local market bear in terms of prices, to where you are filling up your audience and charging the right price to fill up your audience, but if you go higher, then your audience starts to drop. Well, that's feedback. Okay, we've gone too high in this market. So you really have to play that sort of balancing act, because also if you set your prices too low, people will assume that what you're selling is not good. So there's that sort of psychological analysis that has to go on to make sure that you are setting it high enough that people expect they're getting a high quality show, but not so high that they feel like the price is prohibitive for them. Marketing. Marketing is about selecting a target market. So we do this for every single show. We try to think about what are the different demographic attributes of people who would be most interested in this particular show. So we're looking at age, race, gender, income, educational attainment, perhaps even zip code of where they live, and trying to then target the audiences most likely to attend each particular event. And then you want to research what are the habits of people who meet that profile. What are they reading? Where do they get their news? What websites do they visit on a regular basis? Would we be better to advertise on Facebook or Twitter for this particular group? Or is this an Instagram or TikTok group? So really researching what are the habits of that group, and then customizing your advertising to reach the right people. And so once you kind of know who your target audience is, then you're going to create an advertising mix, which means executing contracts with print advertisers, which could be newspapers or magazines, radio, television, internet, billboards, buses, posters, direct mail, et cetera, et cetera. There's a million different ways that you can advertise people. But again, it's all about selecting the right advertising mix to reach the target audience that is most likely to come and participate in your programming. Okay, so that's the marketing side. This is marketing and PR. PR is sometimes referred to as the free stuff because the organization doesn't make a money outlay specifically to get it. But I put it in quotes, the free stuff, because you always have to invest staff time in making these things happen well. And staff time is not free for the most part, unless you've just got an army of volunteers who are all willing to work for no money, which some organizations are blessed with. But most organizations have to pay for it in order for it to be reliable and done on time and done to a quality level. So free stuff. So what are we considering to be the free stuff? Media coverage, previews and reviews. And this again is where personal relationships come in. This is a photo that I photobombed at the Paul and Susan Looney Legacy Endowment and Retirement Party that we had for Paul and Susan Looney. And Marcus Cobb, who is our local reporter and arts critic for the Tuscaloosa News, attended. And we have a personal relationship going back many, many, many years, more than I'm sure he would want me to even mention. But keeping those relationships good will help out the organization, because if I have an urgent need, I know I can reach out to Mark and say, hey, we really need to get the word out about this. Can you make sure it gets somewhere in the paper tomorrow or whatever? And vice versa, when he has a story that he needs a source for, if he calls me up, or actually more often than not talks to me on Facebook and says, I need to talk today, I will make sure that I can talk to him because I know he's under a deadline. So it's all about you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And then the media, hopefully covers through previews, which is articles that come out before your show actually starts running, and then reviews, letting people know how good was the show. Social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, etc. You have to decide a couple of things. One, which platforms are worth you investing your staff time and energy in creating content? Because these suckers need regular content. You can't post once and then a month later. It's got to be on a regular schedule. It's got to be engaging, interesting content that people want to see on that particular platform. On a certain platform like TikTok, it's got to be videos, right? On Snapchat, it's got to be photos. Same thing with Instagram, whereas Facebook and Twitter, you could go more text-based with a little photo, a little video, whatever. So you have to have a strategic plan in how often you're going to be posting, what type of messaging you're putting out, what you're focusing on, because at any given time, we are very often selling either subscriptions or a specific show's single tickets, some kind of academy, educational outreach offering, a fundraising activity, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got to balance out all those messages so that things don't get lost in the shuffle. And then we also have to balance not communicating too much, because then people turn off and go, oh no, I don't want to follow you anymore. You're bombarding me. So we really try to strike that balance, and a lot of energy and time each week in our staff meetings goes into planning out what our social media posting schedule is going to be, what themes we're going to focus on, et cetera. Press releases. This is how you let the media know that you're doing something. And so you write out a very detailed press release with all of the details we posted on our website. We through Shelton State, we have a partnership with them. They also email it out, and we make sure that the reporters and various media know what we're doing at any given time. Calendar listings. There's tons of calendars about different events that are going on, and they're on the web and they're free, but you've got to take the time to go in and submit your event so that it's listed correctly with the correct images and the correct details, et cetera, et cetera. Public service announcements. These are typically, on our case, for radio. We write them for radio, and we fax them or email them out to radio contacts all over West Alabama, and frankly, East Tennessee as well, because we bring in audiences from that whole region. Social group announcements. So we also have a group sales initiative where we will fax and email out flyers and things to book clubs and churches and all kinds of different social organizations with the hopes that they will get the idea that they'd like to bring their whole group or at least announce an opportunity to their group whenever that group is together, because that social face-to-face recommendation or interaction is invaluable to us and helps to also push word of mouth. What else under marketing and PR? We produce the programs and playbills, kind of thinking of it in this functional area. And there's lots of considerations that we put into that, including the legal requirements of what must be listed. Believe it or not, in most contracts with the author, there is a specific font size requirement. If you have to list the playwright more often than not at least 50% of the size of the title font. As stipulated by the contract. So you have to make sure those things are in there correctly. You want to have your cast list in there correctly, your production rights, acknowledging, okay, Samuel French did give me the right to produce this show. You want to also have taken into consideration some other things you can do with your playbill, such as maybe you could generate some revenue with your playbill by offering program ads to local businesses and organizations. And so there's also a potential there not only to bring in money, but to trade advertisements. And so if you need a particular resource for a show, like you need to get some tuxedos or something like that, maybe you go to Birch and Hatfield and say, hey, we would love to offer you a playbill advertisement in exchange for a complimentary rental for this particular show. And so that's a way that you can do a trade of an ad in your playbill. And so that has monetary value and worth to your organization, even if money doesn't change hands. It's that wonderful barter system. The director or producer may have some notes that they want to include in your playbill, and so you want to make sure to include that. In some theaters, you would have someone called a dramaturg who would actually research the show and give you some historical context for the show, etc. And so that would be something important you'd want to include in your playbill. Cast bios and your staff listings, make sure that's up to date and correct. People get their feelings really hurt if you misspell something. So detail oriented is very, very important in a managing director and that person's staff. And then there's sponsor and investor and contributor listings, the people who have supported your organization with extra gifts, extra money, and really raise their hand and say, we believe in you. You want to make sure that you're acknowledging those gifts. You can never say thank you enough to the people who support you. And another thing that is just kind of an other consideration that falls a lot of times under marketing PR is keeping good archives. And so we have a huge digital archive of photos going all the way through our history. Whenever we could find them, we make sure they've been digitized and backed up on the web. We also have detailed archives of previews and reviews in the newspapers, calendar listings from the newspapers, all the times that we appear in print, we try to save those things for future generations so that they'll know where this organization came from and how we were documented over the years. All right, what else? Now we're going to move into the third one, which is personnel management. And I just love this photo because it looks like these two employees are maybe getting into it. And if you've been coming to our shows regularly, you will recognize this scene from Steel Magnolias. So that involves contracts. We talked about that just a little bit, but it also includes payroll. We don't have a lot of people on payroll at Theater Tuscaloosa. It's sort of like we have a few people on payroll for short periods of time, and we call that overhire labor. So if we need extra help in the ticket office, or we need extra help in the scene shop or the costume shop, we might bring somebody in who's going to work 19 hours a week for, say, the next 3 or 4 weeks. And so they are part-time, temporary, overhire labor. But when we do have those people on payroll, they're doing timesheets and they're having taxes taken out. And just like any other business, we are making sure that payroll is being executed in a timely way, an efficient way, and an accurate way. Training and evaluation follows here too. Anytime we bring on a new employee, we want to train them not only because we work here at Shelton State Community College on Shelton State's policies and procedures, but also on any that are specific to Theater Tuscaloosa. In fact, we do have for the ticket office a whole manual, a how-to manual on how to do everything from sell a ticket to emergency management. Volunteer management. We are so reliant on volunteers to do a number of really important things here at Theater Tuscaloosa. House managers. And so we're not just going to say, hey, go house manage. We actually hold trainings for our house managers because they have a higher level of responsibility than your ushers. Ushers do not have to have training before they do their job, because the house managers train the ushers. We also have people who work in cast and crew. And of course, there are lots of other opportunities. We've had volunteers come in and help us to clean out a particular area, like the prop room, or to work in the costume shop for a certain number of days or whatever. So there's lots and lots of ways for people to get involved. And often it's the managing director's responsibility to help manage those volunteers. Resource management, and you'll see why these crazy wacky folks from the 39 steps driving a car is relevant in just a moment. First of all, resource manager, you got to keep the books. So we're tracking our income and expenses, and that means literally every single receipt, making sure that it is entered into the system properly, tracked in the budget appropriately, in the right line item, et cetera, et cetera. Investing revenue. So for example, we have the Looney Legacy Endowment that we started a couple of years back. We have a goal of reaching $1 million in that endowment. Well, the money that is donated to that endowment needs to be invested so that it can grow over time. And eventually, once it gets to that 1 million and above mark, be generating enough revenue that that interest would actually go back into supporting the mission and actually end up in our operating account. And so we currently have that endowment invested in through the Community Foundation of West Alabama. If we were in a very, very fortunate position also that our income exceeded our expenses and we had a large amount of money sitting around, we wouldn't want it to just sit in our checking account. We'd want to invest it in a CD or some other sort of short-term investment where we could earn a higher rate of return, but not have it locked down for so long that we couldn't access it if we needed to become liquid in sort of a quick sort of way. And then managing your cash flow and debt. And so one of my jobs sometimes is to produce a cash flow projection, which we take our budget, which is annual, and break it down over months and see, okay, we expect this much to come in during January, and then in February, we're gonna have to spend this much, and are we gonna go in the red, or are we gonna stay in the black? If we look like we're going in the red, are we gonna need to take out a loan? Are we gonna need to use a credit card? And that's where the debt management comes in there as well. And then insurance. You've got to protect your resources. And so, believe it or not, Theater Tuscaloosa has a number of different insurance policies. One is D&O, which stands for Directors and Officers, which protects the board of directors from being sued personally. There's general liability, workers' compensation insurance, an umbrella policy that would cover anything else that we can't think of, business interruption insurance. That's not actually one we have, but one we're certainly looking into, especially in the post-pandemic world where businesses get interrupted quite a lot. It's going to be hard to get that after the pandemic now, but we're going to be looking into it. Facilities. You also want to have an eye on the maintenance and upkeep of your facilities. Space management often means time. Like if you have rehearsal halls and performance areas, having those booked so that there aren't conflicts where people end up fighting in the hallway about, oh, I was supposed to rehearse here, or I was supposed to perform during this time. You know, making sure that that is all very organized and that there's a process for reserving spaces, etc. And of course, any upgrades or new construction. So if we wanted to, for example, replace all the seating in the auditorium, that would require a plan, a budget, some fundraising, you know, et cetera, and research on how to get those seats and what is the best type of seat, and getting the very best that we possibly can. And then any new construction. If your organization decides it's going to build a new structure, a new theater, a new rehearsal hall, a new business office, those kinds of things also would fall into your facilities management. And of course, inventories, keeping up with what does Theater Tuscaloosa actually own. A lot of the stuff is sort of Shelton States, and we're using it, but some of it is specifically Theater Tuscaloosa. Theater Tuscaloosa used its money to purchase certain things, so it's good and important to know which is which. Board relations. This is our fifth functional area, and this involves things like administrative support for the meetings and retreats. So our board, for the most part, meets monthly. There's a couple of months each year, like December and July, that we kind of take that month off because they tend to be so busy for vacations and parties and so forth. And then once a year, usually in January, we have an annual retreat where we actually do some of that strategic planning that I was talking about before. We step back and look at the big picture and figure out what we're going to do as we move forward. Communicating the mission of the organization and how that mission is being pursued is an important role of the managing director, the staff of the theater. So I mentioned before that our mission is, roughly speaking, to produce high quality theatrical experiences for the people of West Alabama behind the scenes, in the audience, and in the classroom. That pulls in that educational component. And then we tell the board, well, how are we doing that? You know, how do those activities translate into pursuing that mission? Helping to identify future board members. So that sometimes is going through your roles of who's contributing to the organization, who's been a season ticket holder for a long time, who has shown more than your average interest in the organization recently, or who's influential in the community that perhaps could assist the board in pursuing the goals that you've set up in your strategic plan. And so you really think carefully about suggesting some of those folks. Our board is what's called self-perpetuating. So the board does its own nominating and elects its own members. But in reality, a lot of times they look to us to say, well, who might you suggest? And so it's always helpful for us to have a list of 5 or 6 folks that we would suggest. We are also responsible for providing very good reporting to the board of directors. It's so important to be very, very transparent about what the business state of the organization is. Boards of directors can understand when challenges happen. You know, pandemics happen. And downturns in the economy happen, and people stop giving at the same levels, or they stop coming to the arts because they're saving their money for an emergency or something like that. Boards of directors understand that, and if you are transparent and clear, this is the situation we're in. We're looking that we may need loans, we may have to look for extra grants, we may need you as a board to contribute more. They can understand that, but the problem comes in is when sometimes executives of organizations try to sort of sweep problems under the rugs with the thought that, oh, I'll fix it in the future and they'll never have to worry about it. That's what gets people in big, big trouble. And so I always strive to provide the most transparent reporting with optimism, but also with a healthy dose of realism. And then executing any board directives. Sometimes you're at a board meeting and they say, hey, Adam, will you go and produce a report that shows what are the top 10 selling shows in the last 15 years? And I'll go, oh, okay, yes, absolutely. I will email that out within 3 days or whatever time frame is realistic given my current workload. But sometimes you do get specific board directives that you must execute. All right, speaking of executing, labor relations. This is not the same as personnel management. When we're talking labor relations, we're talking about working with unions, for example. Occasionally, we have the opportunity to work with Actors Equity Association if we bring in a professional actor to play a very specific role. Sometimes, most recently I can think of was Bear Country, when we brought in Rodney Clark to play the bear in Bear Country and also to direct the show. So we had to deal with Actors Equity Association. And in his case, also the SDC, the Stage Directors and Choreographers Association. And so whenever we use a director or a choreographer who's a member of that union, we have a very specific contract. We have to get permission from their union to have them work with us, and then we have to pay them a very specific amount and follow specific rules with regards to rehearsal times and breaks and how many hours on and how many hours off and those kinds of things. So we have to be extra careful. Not that we're not always respectful of our volunteers and our actors, but under those circumstances, there are more strict rules. And then for our scenic designers, they may be members of United Scenic Artists. And in that case, again, a very specific contract generated from a national organization that's going to have things like retirement and healthcare and that kind of stuff associated with it as well. And then there are labor laws that fall into this category. Things like OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. We have essentially a construction zone behind our theater, which is our scene shop. It's got saws and welding equipment and all kinds of dangerous stuff like paint and so forth. So we have to follow the same laws that would apply in any workplace setting to protect the health and welfare of our employees. All right, our last functional area that we'll cover today is government relations. And we have Carol DeVellis there in one of our second stage productions, and she's on the phone, and she is talking to a governmental entity. Doesn't it look like she's just giving them what for about something? I love that, Carol. The fire marshal. So this is a big one for managing directors because your theater space undoubtedly has already had a maximum occupancy set. And so it's very important that you are following the maximum occupancy rules to keep your audience members safe, to keep your actors safe. And so you want to maintain a really good relationship with that fire marshal so that the fire marshal doesn't come in and see that you have sold all these standing room only tickets and people are standing everywhere blocking the fire entrances. That's not something we would do at Theater Tuscaloosa because we never want to get on the fire marshal's bad side. But it has happened where theaters find themselves shut down when they have violated those kinds of laws because the fire marshal might just make a random visit. Complying with whatever city ordinances are in place that might relate to your event. This really is rare for us to encounter here at Theater Tuscaloosa, mainly because we're out here at Shelton State Community College. We have plenty of parking, that kind of thing. And even when we have a sold out crowd, we are not going to create a traffic congestion issue. However, if I were downtown Tuscaloosa at the Bama Theater and I was having a huge concert with a well-known person, or I'm at the Tuscaloosa Amphitheater, I'm going to have to be intimately in communication with the police, with the mayor's office to make certain that we are obtaining all the appropriate permits and following all of the city ordinances to where we won't endanger people and we also won't break any of those laws and get folks into trouble. And then also government relations might involve seeking governmental grants and partnerships. So most recently, the CARES Act created the Payroll Protection Program, and we did apply for that, and we're able to receive some funds through that. We also regularly apply for grants from the Alabama State Council on the Arts, who is a huge supporter of the work that we do here at Theater Tuscaloosa. We've gotten grants from the Tuscaloosa Arts Council, and the city of Tuscaloosa supports us. So this is a very important aspect for fundraising and maintaining good relationships with these different governmental organizations. And then advocating for art support and free speech. We are not by any means a lobby, but we do have voices, and our organization is just as free through free speech to take a stance or to advocate for laws and programs and so forth that would be supportive of the arts education programs, arts granting programs, things like that. And so, you know, we would be in danger of losing our 501c3 status if we made lobbying like our full-time, pursuit, if that's all we were doing all day, every day. That's not why Theater Tuscaloosa exists. But if we expend a small percentage of our staff time and energy and money on doing arts advocacy, that's okay. We do a little bit of that. We don't do a ton of it, but we do a little bit of that. So those are the 7 different areas that on a day-to-day basis I have my little hands in those those pies and those pots, if you will. And so, you know, we started with the glorious picture from the producers where it seems like all fun and games and excitement, and really it's really just a lot of work, but it's fun work, it's exciting work, and it's meaningful to me. And I would hope that anybody who served in the role of a managing director would find it meaningful and inspirational and something that gets you out of bed every day because you know you're doing something that's making a difference. And so that's what gets me out of bed each day. If you have questions specific to this video, you can post them in the comments field on YouTube, and I will go in periodically and respond to those. Or feel free to give us a call at Theater Tuscaloosa. We'd be happy to speak to you. Or you can email us, tickets@theatertus.com. Or if you want more information about one of those functional areas, you know, if you just want me to do a video that would be specific about marketing the arts or fundraising for community theaters, or, you know, anything that's exciting to you, let us know that you would be interested in that as a future Masterclass Monday topic, and I'd be more than happy to address that. I'd also like to encourage you to like this video, subscribe to our channel so that you will get those little notifications anytime we post a new Masterclass Monday or any of our other videos. We do lots of videos all the time, and I encourage you to explore our channel and watch some of those behind the scenes video interviews and various things that we produced over the years. And then also, if you wouldn't mind, take a moment to take our survey. There'll be a link right at the end that you can just click right on it. Tell us what you thought of this Masterclass Monday or any of the other Masterclass Mondays that you may have participated in thus far. And that's that. So thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope you found it enlightening, and I look forward in the future to seeing you at the theater. Thanks.